What's up, guys? Back with another video. It is Friday. Happy Friday. Headed up to work. I gotta work tomorrow too, but I'm getting pretty close to the finish of my current project, so pretty psyched on that. So today we're gonna kind of tie in a little bit to what we were talking about last time, with all the Nick Shirley expose, Minnesota fraud, which has had some interesting developments that I guess I'll run through real quick, and touch on a couple things that I didn't bring up in the last video. So since this whole thing has gone viral, there has been really kind of crazy, although to be expected, reaction from corporate media. And by that I mean ABC, NBC, CNN, the usual, kind of just trying to deny the allegations. And the one that really stuck out was CNN, who essentially were like, well, we called some of these places and they told us it wasn't fraud, so debunked, which is about the quality of journalism that you can expect from the corporate press nowadays. So unless you already wanted to buy that it was not, the fraud was not really occurring, nobody was convinced by that other than people who want to be convinced that it's not happening. I would say one of the interesting things that's probably going to happen, and I've already kind of seen small examples of this, but not really to the same amount of virality, is that there's a big incentive for new YouTubers to do similar things, trying to expose fraud that corporate media entities are clearly uninterested in investigating. And when you have somebody go mega viral like this whole Nick Shirley thing has, it just creates an incentive for more people to do more of this sort of independent investigative journalism. So I think that's really interesting. And one of the few things that I was kind of hopeful about in the beginning of the Trump administration was the whole Elon Musk in Doge thing. And that clearly failed, and kind of unsurprisingly so. But if there's this sort of widespread, decentralized grassroots effort at essentially exposing all these fraudulent and wasteful programs, I think public outrage could influence future policy decisions that kind of allow these things to occur. So I think that's hopeful. I'm not saying it's likely or that it's going to happen immediately. I don't think it'll happen immediately. I think we're just kind of at the tip of the iceberg in widespread recognition of this fraud that's been happening and is always happening and is not isolated to the Somali community in Minnesota or any community anywhere. This is kind of how government programs always function. So it's really unsurprising if you understand that. So I think that's kind of the white pill, or one of the white pills here, is just that, if there's enough outrage, and also you kind of have to understand how the relationship between media and politicians work. And people kind of often think that the political apparatus controls the media, and I would say typically that is the incorrect order of operations. Like, the media is actually the dog and the politicians are the tail. So the more that corporate media gets delegitimized and the more we have sort of this citizen journalism stirring up outrage, and the more decentralized it is, because that makes it really hard to discredit and, sort of attack a centralized media apparatus. The more that happens, the better off we are, the better chance we have of like mass outrage actually influencing politicians and their decisions. Because the reality is like, all these politicians, like, they do need votes, and for a long time they've been trying to get votes from importing voters in a lot of cases. Just the more, like, stories like this are really going to undermine that effort. So I think that's all positive stuff. Now, onto this sort of bigger topic that's kind of like the bird's eye view of this whole thing. People are really focusing in on the Somalis. Why are they in the country? Why are these, like, non-citizen supposed refugees, like, being given this preferential treatment and, being allowed to rob taxpayers and all this stuff? And while that outrage and all that, like, it's totally justified, it is particularly offensive when fraud is being committed by people who shouldn't even be receiving any taxpayer benefits. Just the reality of it is, this is how all political programs function. And essentially it's all just laundering schemes. And another thing that broke about this that's pretty significantly relevant to understand how this works is that these same companies, these shell companies essentially, that are set up to incorporate all these daycare programs that, then apply for government funding and are 100% funded by government. They have no other additional sources of funding. So there's no income aside from government grants or subsidies. Those same entities have been shown to be making gigantic political donations, like campaign contributions, back into all the politicians who have, made legislature allow this sort of stuff to happen. So what you have is that these politicians are setting up the legal standing for these sort of like funding, all this charitable subsidies and grants. So they're setting all that up. Then these companies get, created in response to that incentive of, oh, well, if we can get government grants and subsidies and essentially fund our entire operation through the taxpayer, then it's guaranteed money. So they do that and then funnel a bunch of that money back into political contributions, campaign contributions for the same politicians or for new politicians that are supporting these policies. So this is what you would call a favorite person of mine, in the political commentary space. Scott Horton calls this in relation to the military-industrial complex where this same phenomenon occurs. He calls it the self-licking ice cream cone. And that's essentially just because this is like you're creating just a loop, a money laundering loop. So you're enriching whoever the program benefits at the expense of the taxpayer, and then whoever is benefiting from the program reinvests in the politicians creating that slush fund for them. And this happens, that's what I'm trying to say is that, yes, it's outrageous that this is happening in Minnesota with especially this migrant population that should not be receiving any taxpayer funds. That's totally outrageous. That outrage is justified. And anybody who's supporting it is my political enemy because they want me to be robbed to fund all this, all this supposed charity. None of it's charitable, but so those people are my political enemies for sure. But everything that happens in Washington is the exact same relationship. This was shown to be happening with the funds being sent to Ukraine. Early in the war, there were all this aid was being sent to Ukraine, much of it in weapons. So already in just the weapons package, you have these politicians who are enriching their donor class, aka, Boeing, Raytheon, General Dynamics, whatever. So you have those entities being enriched. You have money going directly to Ukraine as well to prop up their, essentially their way to pay for their government because they're essentially bankrupt at this point. And then you have, obviously, the military contractors are contributing campaign funds, but then also it was shown that all these offshore entities that were traced back to Ukraine and Ukrainian oligarchs that are no doubt also profiting off the war continuing, they were contributing campaign contributions as well. So, I know that The View, the Smedley Butler war is a racket, is kind of obvious and sort of played out even at this point. But it really is, and it works that way across the board. Same thing with, the U.S. relationship with Israel. There are clearly other motivating factors at play, which make that a little stickier of a topic, but it's the exact same thing. There were people online on Twitter, talking about how the U.S. just essentially gave Israel a bunch of fighter jets. And there's all these pro-Zionist, media pundits or commentators or whatever that are they didn't give them to them. Israel paid for them. It's a loan. And it's yeah, but how are they paying for that? Oh, through all that monetary, all that money that's given to Israel. That's how they're paying for it. So you can say, oh, it's a loan, but then if we're giving them money, even if it's in name for another thing, money is fungible. You can take money that's supposed to be for one thing and pay for a different thing with it. Or if we give you money and you didn't otherwise have the ability to spend it on this, well, now you have money to spend on the other thing. They're all just crazy, obfuscations. It's all just laundering schemes, pretty much everything works like that. Everything is just a laundering scheme to enrich politically connected donors and recipients of welfarism in one form or another. That's how this all works. That's how the DC establishment runs. That's how it stays in power. That's what the swamp is. Government spending is the swamp. So that's why as soon as Donald Trump was like this, this administration was bragging about how the big beautiful bill is the biggest bill ever and blah blah blah, that's how you know that Trump had completely just become the swamp. I don't know who it was. I apologize for not remembering the poster's name, but somebody posted this administration took the swamp and turned it into a federally protected wetland. And that's just perfect. That's exactly what it is. Like, you can't fight the swamp in name and then be having the largest federal budget of all time. Like, that's just, those are completely exclusionary, purposes. You cannot have both. You cannot fight the swamp while funding the swamp to the highest amount it's ever been funded. So I think people should just step back and understand that relationship that is ever present in all parts of DC politics, really in all parts of all politics, but, the DC politics being what most people are paying attention to. For instance, the exact same thing is happening in my state, Massachusetts, right now. Maura Healey has been caught funding all these illegal immigration welfare programs, and taxpayers are pissed. There was a vote to audit the state expenditures that had 72% of support, I think, amongst the voters, and the legislature is refusing to pass the bill despite a supermajority voting for it. So I wonder what they're trying to hide. It's not really a mystery. Like, anybody who knows anything and isn't just a shill for whoever's in power currently knows what's happening here. And truthfully, people are sick of it. So hopefully this is the snowball that turns into an avalanche of public outrage. Politicians being fearful is probably the only thing that will fix this, short of Fed post material. So I won't say any of that, but fear of things happening that you're not really allowed to say legally is the only thing, short of those things happening, that will change anything, in my opinion. So we'll see how that goes. I think maybe I'll keep it a short video for today, but I thought all those developments were interesting, and there's a lot of instances of this happening, even if this one is getting all the attention right now. This is constantly happening in pretty much every facet of the federal government all the time. Like, it's always happening. So no surprise if you understand that. I guess one other thing that I would like to just kind of tie this into, so you can be aware, and I won't get into the big details of it, but you should just understand that a lot of people are asking, like, where are all these refugees coming from? Why are they here? And it's really obvious particularly, let me critique the right wing for a moment here. All these refugees, all these countries that are sending refugees to the US have had their countries attacked and, in many cases destroyed, in big part thanks to US military intervention. And that is a direct causal relationship, not like it's not like correlation, it's causation. Like, there was that Afghan refugee that was, I forget which shooting it was, but in the past couple months there was that one. It's like, yeah, why do you think he was allowed into the country? Why do you think he came here? It's like, and I'm warning people about the same thing with this Venezuela whole, campaign that the Trump administration is trying to bring us on now. The more we interfere in these countries, the more we destabilize these countries, the more demand there's going to be for us to bear some of the costs when it comes to the refugees associated with that happening. So the quicker we shut off the military intervention in all these third world countries, that's shutting off the tap at the mainline water source here. If you don't want more refugees coming from third world countries, we need to bring the troops home. We need to stop destabilizing these countries. And that will, first of all, save us money on the front end of not paying for the world empire that has done us no good and will be, if this country's destroyed, it'll be because of attempting to maintain the empire. It will, and then it'll shut off the tap of third world immigrants trying to seek refuge here. And by doing that, you shut off the demand for all the welfare help being given to these refugees when they get here. You also shut off a lot of the demand for foreign aid that we send to these countries to help rebuild them in one form or another. Whether that's, Halliburton getting a no-bid contract to rebuild Iraq, Afghanistan, whether that's BlackRock supposedly going to get a contract to rebuild Ukraine. All these sort of slush funds that are used in order to do that same relationship. You enrich your donors by giving them no-bid contracts, or by boosting their sales, or by giving a loan that is only guaranteed if you use said contractor or whatever. Like, the sooner we cut off the original problem, which is the military interventionism, the sooner all of those other problems cease to exist. So, and, if we didn't have troops stationed all around the globe doing literally nothing for any of our benefit, well, maybe you wouldn't have to have this big search for ICE agents. Maybe you could actually enforce criminality within the U.S. I think this is the main issue that affects all these other issues. And so if you don't want a bunch of third worlders coming into the country and changing the culture and scamming and defrauding the American people, then leave their countries alone so they can fucking stay there. How about that? It's really easy to understand, why these people are coming here. And then you're just providing all the bleeding hearts great reason to support all this welfarism. So we should stop doing all that. We should worry about this country and the problems inside of our borders. You know, Ukraine, if they want to continue the war, they can talk to Europe. They can figure it out themselves. Not our problem. Israel, not our problem. Taiwan, not our problem. South America, not our problem. So, in closing, bring the troops home, abolish all the welfare to, all the foreign aid, all the corporate welfare to all the military contractors, all these subsidies that are abusing the American taxpayers, all of it, end all of it, and you'd be a long way to fixing a lot of these problems that everybody is righteously ticked off about. So that's the rant for today, guys. I'm going to be at work in a few. Hope you guys all have a good weekend. Like, comment, subscribe, share, send your hate mail. Follow me on YouTube and follow my Instagram, Skyler _Carns, SKYLER_KARNS on Instagram. That's where I post a lot of this stuff. I will be trying to grow that account. You go follow me on Twitter too. I should probably make a easier to spell handle because my handle is not easy to spell, but I'll link it in the description. So if you watch the video, thanks. Tell me what you think, and I'll probably see you guys next week. All right, later.